Hello, friend. Thanks for joining me for another book chat. Today, let's spend a few minutes with The Game of All Games Essays on Freedom, Love, and Other Dreams by J.P. Pereira. This collection of essays was originally published in 2023, and it is the second collection of essays that I have read by this author. I previously read and chatted Thoughts from the Dark Corner here on my channel, and I will link to that chat down in the details if you're interested in checking that out. But the Game of All Games. This collection is divided into 5 different topics or parts, and each part has then, various numbers of essays that are sort of on that theme. And the different parts are freedom, criticism, love, truth, and meaning. So I'd like to kick off this chat with a quote from the book, and the quote is from an essay called The Game of All Games. It is towards the end of the book, but it sort of explains what the book is about, or the collection is about. The quote says, "Every single word that has dropped from the tip of my fingers onto the keyboard from the beginning of this essay has been the carrying out of this improvisation. I am making myself as I go along. That is, coming to know who I am by acting, as well as acting based on said knowledge. I am philosophizing, orienting myself, and before philosophy, the very process of basic orientation." So he's saying here, I think, that this collection of essays is all about meaning. It's about self-creation. It's about like reading on these topics and then, discovering some new thought or some new perspective that you didn't have before. It enriches your life, and then it sort of subtly actually changes you, right? I think that is so cool. So how I'm going to structure this chat, I think, is I'm going to go through a few of the essays just so that you get an idea of what the essays are about. But if you're interested in hearing in lots more detail, I have an author's discussion over on my other channel where we delve into these essays in very much in depth, and we had a wonderful, wonderful discussion, and that video is over on my other channel. I will link to that down in the details if you're interested in checking it out. But so to kick things off, let's talk about the first section, which is called freedom. There's several essays here that I thought were really interesting. The first one is called "Give Me Freedom" or "Give Me the Other Freedom." And I really got a different sort of perspective about freedom from reading this essay, because freedom is sometimes, I think it's very much, we, at least here in the US, are often focused on the external freedom, which is like human rights, like rights. I have the right to do this. So you're given that right from sort of external authority. And this essay then explores like the limits to freedom and how limits to freedom are actually required for freedom to actually have any meaning. And I just thought that was so interesting. Then there's another essay called "The Discipline of Boredom." So this I thought was really interesting because it made me think about how boredom has changed over really the last maybe 40 years especially, but really it's been a process going on for about 100 years. But back in like the 19th century, when there wasn't as many distractions, then a person might be, wait on the mail because they're kind of bored. And until the mail comes, then they're just sort of at a loss, if they don't have to work, of course, if they have the leisure. But today, we actually have to force ourselves to become bored because our world is so full of distraction that we have to make a conscious effort to put down the distraction and allow ourselves to be bored. And so what this means is reflection, right? Boredom promotes sort of reflection. When you're bored and you're just sort of sitting around daydreaming, you're sort of like, you're just sort of free. It's just sort of a free thought, right? You're just sort of sort of a stream of consciousness thinking about various things. But if you're distracted by your phone or whatever, you're not doing that. And so I think that's really interesting to think about. So then the next section is about criticism. And so I always have had a sort of maybe conflicted view of criticism on I always on this channel, including on this channel, where I don't really like to try to criticize literature too much. I don't feel like I'm necessarily qualified. I can tell you my experience with it, but criticism, like criticism, I've sort of shied away from, but I've since sort of changed because I've come to see the value of that. And this section really discusses that. The first essay in this section that I thought was really fun was The Jester. So The Jester is about how you can sort of criticize a power structure. The Jester, like in medieval times, the Jester could say these horrible things about the king, up to a certain point. This essay actually talks about a modern jester, Ricky Gervais, at the Golden Globes, which I actually watched that performance and thought it was pretty cringy, but nevertheless, this exploration of that sort of speaking, that sort of criticism of power structure, how far you can take that before there's consequences, etc., is explored in this essay. Then there's an essay called The Danger of Hating on Haters. So haters, is kind of a catchphrase today. It's like, oh, you're just a hater. It's a way to dismiss any kind of criticism. And he explores that topic here in this essay. Then there's an essay called The Gimmick that I thought was really funny. The essay itself is like maybe 2 sentences and then a footnote, and the whole rest of the essay is about gimmicks in writing and how books actually want your attention. They want to grab your attention because books want to be read, and so gimmicks can work. Many times they can actually work, and they work for the benefit of the book sometimes, and then sometimes not. So I thought that was fun. Then the next section is called Love. There's an essay called The Two Faces of Love. And this talks about like I love because I love despite. So like I love you because of this, because you're funny or you're smart or you're rich or whatever, and then there's the love despite, which is, I love you even though you're mean, or I love you even though you're lazy or whatever. So, I think there's a sort of, I had a sort of I had a sort of a notion preconceived notion that the love despite is actually the more noble, which is loving someone in spite of their flaws. But he argues here that, you really actually need both in order for love to be a fully fledged out entity. So that was fun. Then there's an essay here called The Seductress. And this essay was really, really fun to me because it actually sort of in the form of a short story. And it is a guy he actually has been a theological student, but he meets this woman in a coffee shop and he thinks she's just so self-assured. She's so self-aware, I guess you could say, that she reflects the divine, because ultimately, we're all divine. So she's so selfishly herself, that then that selfishly yourselfness becomes unselfish, if that makes sense in the short version. The essay does a lot better job of explaining that. The next section is called Truth, and there's a essay about truth as caricature. I thought this was really interesting too, because portraiture, what's real, what's real, what's true, and how caricature, even though it doesn't reflect like the photographic realism of a person, it nevertheless can show us some sort of truth of that person. And so I thought that was really interesting. And then there's an essay called The Truth of Tolerance. And this is all about tolerance in the West and how it's developed over time and how sort of relativism and skepticism versus the truth, right? And so we don't want to ever appear intolerant in the West because of our history of intolerance, basically. And so he explores this, though, really well as far as the limits of that. And so anyway, I thought it was super interesting. Finally, the last topic is called meaning, and these are all essays around the topic of meaning itself. The essay, The Game of All Games, that I started out with, that's actually in this section. There's a essay here called In Defense of Miracles that is in defense of miracles, right? Like believing, keeping the door open for the miraculous in your life is very enriching. If you just think that miracles can never ever happen, then you live in a completely materialistic world. It sort of flattens everything. I mean, it's not to say you have to believe in every superstition. He's not arguing that, but nevertheless, miracles he defends. And I thought that was really, really a good read. He has an essay called The Wanderers, which is all about like wandering in the desert, wandering, seeking answers to life, right? And searching for those answers and how you come across wells that you can drink from for a while, but then you need to move on to another well. So you're sort of never ending wandering in the desert, and just a really, really cool essay. Finally, he wraps up the collection actually with an essay called On the Use of the Useless. He's talking here about writing, I guess, for the sake of writing, or writing in the sense of this use that, like, if after reading this collection, I didn't keep this list of like, my opinion changed on this topic and now I see the world differently because X, Y, Z, like lists like that, but it's a holistic thing and you become you change somehow with everything you read, not just this collection, but literally everything you allow into your mind changes you somehow. And I think that's pretty cool. All right, I'll leave this chat with that. My next chat is going to be some contemplative fiction, Gilead by Marilynne Robinson. And I have finished this already, and we'll have a chat on it coming up soon. So until next time, take care.